So let's have a little lesson on this piece. The main thing in this piece is the melody, right? This is a traditional Spanish song, so song like the Child of the Mother, and it's a melody that's very well known. So whenever you have a melody like this, you have to make sure that you just know the melody really well and that you can play it on its own. So let's just play the melody. So that's the very top voice. There's actually a version of this in my first method book, or my second method book, sorry, a duet version where one person just plays the melody in upper positions. So the main thing is like make sure you can shape that melody in a nice legato way. Now, in this piece, there's a lot of suspensions. That means like in that end of the phrase there, this B is the suspension. It's like a leftover note from here, and then it resolves there. So whenever you have a suspension and a resolution, and a suspension is just a note that doesn't belong in the chord. Well, it's a note that's hung on from before, but it's a dissonant note in terms of the harmony. And then it resolves. So make sure that whenever you have that tension resolution, that you add a little bit of extra oomph to the first note, and then you let it resolve in a more gentle way. So tension, relaxation. So again, so a little bit of oomph on that note, and then you let it resolve. Don't go overboard though, because it should all be in the context of a nicely shaped melody. So go through the whole piece playing that melody on its own. And that will make sure that the most important parts of the piece are present, and the thing that everyone's listening to will sound really great. So nice and smooth with a sense of a pulse. And then you can get to the chords. Now, the thing about this piece is that the chords are actually quite difficult. When I first started looking at the piece, I felt like, oh, it's so awkward, it's kind of difficult to read. But then after a while, it's actually not that bad, and it's quite a secure piece because lots of the chords, they work really well with the melody. So my suggestion is, like I was doing, I mean, I'm kind of sight reading the piece, but I've looked at it a little bit. But as I was just doing when I was warming up with this, is just play the chords on their own as well. So you play the melody on its own, learn to shape it nicely, and then just play the chords. sorry. Just get really comfortable with all those chord shapes. And so this way you can start practicing the piece and let it digest slowly into your hands. Like get to know it slowly. So in terms of enjoyment, you'll be playing the melody, which is very enjoyable because it's such a pretty melody, right? And you'll also be learning the chord shapes. And then when you go to put them together, you'll have a little bit of a head start in both. You'll know what you want to do with the music in terms of the melody, and you'll know some of the chord shapes. If you start by just like playing the piece right off the bat, you're going to find it pretty difficult. It's hard to read a little bit, and some of the shapes feel really big and a little bit awkward. So that's my recommendation, is to start working on the piece with those two things in mind, and then let it come together slowly. So besides that, there's not much to talk about. It's just a really melody-based piece. So let's just walk through the piece slowly. So you have to tune down to D. If you're not familiar with that, you can watch other videos, but the main idea is that when you're up in E, do a good 3 turns, and then adjust it to your 4th string. And then you're ready to go. There's going to be a lot of little stretches like this, like little strange stretches and then shifts into other chord shapes and then another stretch. But the thing about it is that your fingers can stay down, sustaining everything. So although the stretch is a little bit difficult, it's very, very secure. So if you get nervous when you play or something, it's not too much of a worry because you're going to be holding your fingers down the whole time. Slide the 3rd finger up here so you can do this stretch. When you're doing this next part, I would recommend holding on to the C. It's notated as just an 8th note, so you could let go of it, but I like to hold on to it so I can sustain it a little bit longer. And then into that difficult chord shape. But there, if you let go of it, it's not that big of a deal as well, because there's lots of notes ringing out. This chord shape's a little bit tricky to do, but it's kind of a big extension with the 2nd finger, but it's not too much to worry about. The bigger thing is lift it off when you play the next one. For me, I've got small hands, and so this is quite the extension with the 2nd finger, and it mutes out the 5th string. So when I play the E in bar 4, that comes after the low B, I have to make sure I lift this finger off. There, the suspension happens in the inner voice with the I finger. This D to C sharp. So that's suspension, so it's tension, release, or resolution. And then onward. This is a bit of a tricky one. Just follow my fingerings. There's that suspension again in this 4th finger. So that one little bar at bar 7, again, it's pretty secure overall. It's just a little bit of a stretch, like this 3-4 stretch here is a bit intense. And there's lots of rearranging of fingers, but it's not so bad. If you have real big troubles with it, just play the upper voice. If you got rid of the thirds, it'd be a lot easier. But that said, practice it with the thirds. I mean, that's the piece. So, but just make sure that you practice it very formulaically. So you play this, bass note, next notes, nice and clear. You can hear everything. Keep your bass note down until you shift. And then you go on. Again, there's so much sustain happening that you can get away with that, that difficult passage. But it is a little tricky, so you'll have to circle it and work on it a little extra. Moving on from bar 9. You could bar here or not. Doesn't matter. Reach out. Suspension, resolution. So always be looking for those suspensions. You can hear them. I mean, if you take music theory, you'll learn about non-chord tones, but you can really just listen for it and make sure that every time you hear a dissonant note like that, that you resolve it nicely. Lots of these shapes with the fourth finger like this. So if you're one of those players, those students that have their hand position still like this, and your teacher's always saying like swing that hand around, well, you just have to do it in this piece because you're going to use your fourth finger on these notes so often that you really need to make sure you're watching your left hand position and that it's pretty parallel with the strings, your knuckles. And then the harmonic at the 12th fret, and then 7th. So remember, with harmonics, just right over top of the metal, right over top of the fret. Don't push down hard, just touch the string. And it should ring out really nice and clearly. Just do a little bit of a negative position here and then slide the second finger up. That way you can slide it again into that D. So that harmonic there, if you're not used to right-hand harmonics, you fret the fifth fret at the first string. So you fret that A with your first finger, and then go to the A, so E, F, G, or E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, touch the string, and then pluck it with this. So again, grab an A, find A, so this is the 12th fret, so E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, right over top of the metal, touch the string, don't push it down, but touch it, and then pluck it with the A finger. Should ring out nicely. And there's no trick to this, you have to just grab that chord shape. It's a bit of a handful, but you can be in such a rit, slowing down at the end here, that you can incorporate that slowing down with the tricky chord change. So just to sum this all up, play the melody on its own, make sure you can phrase it well. Practice the chord shapes on their own. So you just, for the first week or two, you can just like get those chord shapes into your left hand. And then after that, it's such a handful that it's actually pretty secure. Just make sure you're sustaining everything and making the melody ring out nicely along with those tricky chord shapes, and you're fine. And then just look for those suspensions and resolutions, because that's a nice musical touch that's really part of the piece. And just incorporate your musicality into the technical difficulties of the work, such as the ending there. Tricky chords, but in the context of a little bit of a slowing down at the end of the phrase, it can combine your musicality with your guitar technique. And make this piece really work for you. So it can be tricky at first, but if you go about it in this way, I think it'll help a lot, and just give it a good amount of time.